Project Binky in colour. Starring NIK BLACKHURST. Also starring Richard Brunning and Rex Hamilton as Abraham Lincoln.
Tonight's episode, The Butler Did It. Coming up in episode 9, I have twins. Nick has a haircut. And I finally get an idea.
I've got an idea. I know it doesn't look like much, but since the end of the last episode, an awful lot of work's gone into finishing off the frame that'll hang the front panels off. To start with, we've cleaned back all the welds on this difficult bendy bit round here. We found a neater solution for the ends of the transverse bar that runs underneath the back of the bonnet. We've added some gussets, here, 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 and here. And we've tidied up the bottom of the pivot mount. And then after lunch, we completely redesigned the catch mountings.
Also, to make sure we don't have any clearance problems with the back bottom corner of the front frame, I've taken a bit of a slice out of the A-post. And this all works perfectly well as it sits here. However, here in the workshop, the car is perfectly level and there's no wind.
No wind? You're having a laugh, aren't you?
Okay, truthfully, sometimes there is some wind in the workshop.
Oh, come off it. You're more flatulent than Freddie Frobisher.
Is that our first fart joke?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Kind of feel like we should celebrate. Anywho, to make sure we're not gouging paint off every time we open and close the front out in the real world, I've fitted a little plastic button pad to the inside of the frame, which acts on this little slider thingy here.
Let's have a look at the slider thingy in action. I have to admit, that's really quite neat.
So the next job is to fit the front end panels for good.
Firstly, we've got to get rid of these annoying ripples in the mounting flanges. And we haven't had an action music montage for a while, so let's get to work. And there we have it. All the panels ready to be welded onto the frame. Best we start fitting the buggers. First up, the A panels. Nick will gently tap them onto the frame with a massive rubber hammer. Then check for clearances when the flip front is closed. And the panel gap looks pretty good too. Next up, it's the front panel. Then the near side front wing. Now the offside wing. The scuttle panel goes on before finally the bonnet gets put into place.
Before we get carried away clamping and welding this front end together, we at least need to think about getting rid of some of the heat we're going to generate in the engine bay. Now we could use a Sierra Cozzi style or similar vent in the bonnet, but quite honestly we haven't got time for the list of reasons we're not going to be doing that. But mainly, if we use anything on the bonnet to get rid of the heat, it's going to stick out and it won't fit in with the look we're going for. Secondly, the furthest back highest point of the engine bay where all the heat's going to collect is actually here on the scuttle panel. So what to do? We could just cut a big hole here and put some mesh behind it. We could get the hole cutter out and have some nice circular holes. Or we could have some pretty triangular holes like a Manta 400. Manta 400. But honestly, I think we can be a bit more subtle than that. What we need to do is think, what would BL have done back in the day? Actually, no. They'd have just gone on strike and forgotten about the whole idea. But other manufacturers at the time were using things like these slots. This is our backup plan, and it's the usual way of doing this. Cut them out of a car that's got them, weld them in where you need them.
But we don't want to do it like that. We'd like to try and do it like the manufacturers do, by stamping it. And to do that, we've got this. And this. And this. And this. And finally this. And it goes together something like this. We've got the base with the female part of the die in it. We've got 2 springs, which we had to make by wrapping a bit of wire around a bolt. The upper platform, using some good old-fashioned valve springs. And then finally the punch, with 2 locating pins, to make sure we're lined up correctly. So it all slots together like that, and hopefully we'll be able to punch some holes in the scuttle panel.
A proper tool, I'm sure you'll agree. And you've got to love the slot punch too. Let's put it to work, see if we can not ruin a very expensive scuttle panel.
Yeah, but you already know this works. You've tried it on the old one. To get this right, it's all about measuring and marking out. Firstly, finding the centre of the panel and making sure that's also the centre line of the car. Then mark out the centres of the slots. There's no second chances with this, so it pays to take some time to get it right. This is marking out the centres of the 3mm locating holes that we'll drill in the panel in a minute. Because the panel is curved, for it to look right, the slots will have to follow that curve. Now all the holes are marked out, we can centre pop them, ready for the drill. A steady hand is called for at the pillar drill. There's no good attempting this under the influence of caffeine withdrawal. So that's all the holes drilled in the scuttle panel. Best we make sure that the punch fits before we go any further. To give us a fighting chance of punching through the panel with our weedy hand press, we're cutting some slots between the locating holes. Now the panel is ready for the operation. We've welded a couple of brackets to the punch to stop it moving around on the press. A quick dry run before we attack the scuttle panel to make sure the action is smooth. Yep, I think that'll do. The punch was made from bits we had kicking around the workshop. The main parts, the punch and the die, were machined on our CNC mill, and the rest of it was knocked up out of anything we had lying about. Well, here we go. The first punch through the expensive new panel. I really hope this doesn't make a massive mess of it. Heart in mouth time. Let's have a look at it. Cool, yeah, that'll do. That felt so good, it'll be rude not to try it again. And that's what it looks like when all the slots have been punched in. From underneath. And now with a coat of black paint on it. Let's see what it looks like on the car.
Well, I'm calling that a success.
As well you might. That's come out extremely well. Now we need to crack on getting this lot on here.
Before we go any further, I need to talk about the seam between the A panel and the wing here. Now I see this done the wrong way all the time, and it's one of my buttons. What tends to happen is when setting the depth between the 2 panels, people line up the front face of the flanges. And this nearly always ends up with a step between the 2 panels. This is wrong at the best of times. By the time you come to put a wheel arch on, you end up with a gap either one side or the other of the flange. What you need to do is always line the 2 panels up from behind.
With it all clamped up, the panel gaps aren't too bad considering the only reference we have from the original car is the lower screen rail where the scuttle panel mounts. And to be honest, we're not even sure that's in the right place.
I'm not going to pretend these panel gaps are award winning, but they're certainly well within fettling range come final bodywork time in prep for paint. Best get welding.
As Nick's on a welding mission, it's time for us to get the funk out. You know, I'd really like to help Nick with all this work, but quite frankly, he won't let me anywhere near the welder until I've read this. Thanks, John. After all that welding, it's now high time for a bit more welding, as the next job is to extend the inner wing mounting band, that will turn into the rain gutter, down to meet the front panel. To turn these extensions into rain gutters, we've got to trim them both to an even width all the way down, then bend up a return to form a channel. The bonnet will close on the outside of the return, and any water will run down the channel and out at the front panel. OK, now the gutters are done, it's time to attach the front panel to the frame more permanently. This is going to need some CAD. And here's the template. Just got to cut it out of steel. You all know the score. Now it's time to weld it to the car. That'll give the frame and front panel some much needed extra rigidity. The last part of the front end work is to fit the A panel to the frame with a few plug welds. So with the front panel work complete, the final item to fix on is the freshly punched scuttle panel.
Been having a bit of a rethink about welding this scuttle panel on at the moment. Still a lot needs to go on underneath it, and I think it might be an advantage if we can take it off out of the way. So for now, I'm just going to screw it on.
Nothing an air drill and a ratchet screwdriver and a few self-tappers can't fix. Lovely. When this thing is finally finished, can't exactly tell you when yet. I mean, we did originally think it was going to be summer 2014, but that didn't happen, did it? It's going to need some meaty arches on it. So let's get rid of the weeny little 10-inch wheel spec things and cut some bigger arches out. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. We need a hole big enough to take a few extra inches. Time to reinstate that return lip with Nick's bending stick. A quick spray off with some primer, and voila! 2 arches big enough to take the 13-inch wheels and a pair of Mahusive extensions. Perfect.
If you can remember back to what started us off on this panel replacement odyssey in the first place, you'll know we haven't quite finished with this front end yet. We still need to finalise the position of the radiators, and that means 2 things. Firstly, cutting big chunks out of my nice new front panel, and secondly...
Yep, putting the sodding engine and box back in again. It does seem an awful shame to take the grinder to this new front panel, but needs must when the devil vomits into your kettle.
Okay, radiator time, again. Not worried about the engine cooling rad, that should go straight back where it was on its original mountings down here. The worry is the charge cooler rad. I had to cut the brackets off to get the front end panel work to line up, but since then I've managed to sneak a bit more room by pulling the bottom of the front panel forwards. All we can do is get the brackets as close to where they were before and go from there.
With the front panel spaced out just a tick, we'll clamp the original rad mounts in and see where the land lies. It's very, very tight in there, but we only need half a gnat's nadger to make it work.
I think all we need is a more permanent bottom mounting solution and a bit of a trim in the corners.
If that's what it needs, that's what it'll get. We have a welder, a large selection of grinders, and a will to use them. Excellent. 1 charge cooler radiator in place with half a gnat's nadger clearance. Better just check that the engine cooling radiator fits, I suppose, before we go any further. That'll do just nicely.
And I think that brings us right back to where we left it last time, which is fixing the tops.
We need to make something that will come off the chassis leg, as we can't use the front end because it's removable, and pick up on the peg mount on the charge cooler rad, and also on the semi-circular mount on top of the water radiator. Due to budget and time constraints, we are unable to bring you footage of how we made these brackets, but suffice to say it took absolutely bloody ages, and was a source of much weeping and gnashing of teeth. They bolt onto these handy little extra mounts welded to the chassis leg. Then rubber grommets fit inside the holes. The water radiator is isolated with yet more rubber, and the whole thing goes together like this. They may look deceptively simple, but honestly, you don't want to know how many hours went into just these two brackets. Nick has demonstrably more grey hairs because of these things, and I've had to endure some world-class whinging as a result. However, they're done now, so all's well. Well, I say well, it's not all that well. I mean, we're not even sure that the bonnet will fit yet.
Of course the bonnet will bloody fit.
Time to put your money where your mouth is, Blackhurst. Get that bonnet bolted on and let's have a look and see if you're right. I never doubted you. Not for a moment. Honest. That looks pretty damn good. He's got to be happy with that. Oh God, not again. I know that look. He's thinking.
I mean, it works. It's just a bit, I don't know, what's the word nowadays? Meh. Oh yeah, we went there.
No strings or funny business here. How the hell has he done that?
I'll show you how it works in a second, because at the moment you still need to open the bonnet and undo the catches manually, which makes the whole thing pointless. So I intend to sort that using this lot. Somehow. Sorted. These things usually take about 5 minutes.
That looks really complicated, even for you.
Okay, it looks really complicated, but like anything else complicated, it's just a load of really simple things put together in a way that makes you think you'll never understand them. So concentrate, here comes the science. We have a positive and negative coming in from a battery, 2 of each. They come into a connector block, that's just a connector block. These are the relays that control the direction switch of the 2 motors. 4 relays per motor, 2 motors, 8 relays. This is a widget I've made on top of an electric window motor to open both catches simultaneously. There's a pin goes in here that locks this lever to the motor. This microswitch switches this motor off in the closed direction. This lower microswitch does the same in the open direction. And this one above it delays the start of the front opening motor until the catches are released. These are the bonnet catches, you've seen them before. This is a specifically designed for the job motor and gearbox and in no way off a Mondeo seat. And this is a 2-way momentary switch. When you press it, it should all work like this.
In case you missed it, let's have a closer look at that. The switch is flicked, which fires the window motor. This pulls the cables to release the latches. Then this motor starts up to open the flip front. The motor actuates the flip front hinge via a bell crank, and the mechanism is assisted by some pretty heavy-duty springs. With the radiator in place, you can see how little room we had to work with.
I am considering putting a couple of limit switches on this little mechanism. That would mean we could use a latching switch to operate the front end and we wouldn't have to hold anything down. From there, of course, it's a fairly simple wiring job to have the whole flip front on a key fob remote, but honestly, I think you can go too far with these things.
Really, Nick? Really? So that's it. The shell is now complete. New panels, electric windows, central locking, and a flip front so cunning you could brush your teeth with it. That's a massive milestone in the build, and now we can move on to the interior. I just want to jump in and make brum brum noises.
Time to choose some seats then. This is one of the seats that came out of the Mini. As you've probably already guessed, it won't be going back in. They're nasty, and they're about as supportive as Brian May at a badger cull.
And at the other end of the scale, we've got these. Composite bucket seats and 6-point harnesses. This is great if you're forest worrying, but why anybody to put them in a road car is beyond us.
Perhaps we're just getting old, but whatever, we need to find a compromise between the two. Something that's supportive, but comfortable. Incidentally, this is what I always look for in a bra, but I've also managed to find some seats that fit the bill. And of a Honda S2000.
These attractive black leather seats have the added advantage of being wiped clean, which might be a boon come the first test drive. They're actually a tick narrower than the mini seat, and they've got proper runners on them. For a frame of reference, we've got to bolt on one of the original seats on the original mountings. From there, we can work out where the new seat goes. We've got to set these Honda runners about a quarter of a travel forward from fully back, as we're both strapping 6-footers. Let's just offer this seat up and see if it'll fit at least somewhere near where we need it to be. So the seat base height isn't too bad, and the clearance to the roof is pretty good, but the runners are sat on their original seat boxes, and the seat needs to come across towards the centre. Trouble is, some idiot put a freaking massive tunnel in the way. We've put the seat on blocks so we can centre it properly, and now the centres of the two different seats are within 10 mil or so close enough. The only real option we have to drop the seat down far enough is to take the grinder to the tunnel and cut it out. It's not ideal, but we really don't have a choice. We'll deal with the fact that Nick's just cut through the prop shaft centre bearing carrier later when we get back underneath. It's high time for a CAD template to fill in this unsightly hole. Quickly whip up the steel replacement with spreader plates and captive nuts naturally, and then weld the bugger in. The other brackets are also now fitted to the shell, ready to try the seat in its final position. Lovely. Now all we need to do is bolt it down. Surely it's time to jump in and make brum brum noises now.
I'm going to have to try it, but I don't want to get on my nice leather seat with my heavily soiled onesie on, so excuse me a second.
That's right, ladies. If you've ever wondered what Nick wears under his overalls, it's another pair of overalls. He's like a big onion. Well, he brings tears to my eyes frequently. Time to climb in and check out the seating position. That's Nick's happy face, so he must be pleased. Footwell looks good, and there's plenty of headroom as well. There's even a little bit of elbow room, so that's great.
We'll worry about the passenger seat a bit later on. When I've got the driver's seat in, I can think about pedal box, steering column and gear stick. I'm going to start with the pedal box, but before I can do anything, I need to get the dash in here and see how much room we've got to work with.
Here's the dash pieces we'll be using, but originally this Mini didn't have a dash like this, but it's just a case of drilling a couple of holes in the top rail to fit the crash pad. Here's the dash rail back in at the measurements we took right back at the beginning of the build.
And now you know why I haven't cut these chassis rail ends off yet.
Yeah, whatever. They've been annoying me for months. Now it should be a simple case of slotting the dash into place.
What a pisser.
I thought the problem was with the measurements I'd taken for the lower dash rail before I cut it out. So I went and found another Mini, took the measurements, and they match. So while I was there, just to take any second guessing out of the equation, I made this. This lower dash rail's flimsy at the best of times, but now it won't have the Mini pedal box to give it any support, so I really don't want to be hanging the steering column off it. So for that job, I've got this piece of 38mm tube that I'm going to run behind the rail.
Any excuse for another negative jig thingy. It picks up on the heater vent holes and the rear view mirror mount, as none of the original datums exist anymore. There's not a huge amount of room for any kind of pedal box in there.
This lot is the standard pedal and master cylinder arrangement for a Celica, and there's no way we've got room for any of it. But we kind of knew that. Now I could make something, but it's a hell of a lot of work. So instead, we went for a beer with our friends at Competition Supplies down at Silverstone. And after much beard scratching, they've sold us this.
The guys there really know their stuff, and they have the largest stock of Tilton gear this side of the pond.
This particular pedal box is designed to work like this. We haven't got room for this either, but we knew that when we bought it. That's why we got this one with the steel pedals so we can modify it. Thing is, now I've got the dash rail in the right place, there isn't quite enough room to do what I wanted to do with this pedal box either. That now means I've got to think about the unthinkable.
The unthinkable being cutting into his lovely bulkhead. He's not going to want to do this. I can't see it happening. There must be another option. Will he do it? Will Nick actually cut through the Mini's new bulkhead? Will I ever get any sleep again? And what is the frequency, Kenneth? The answer to these and many more questions in the next exciting instalment of Project Binky. Be sure to tune in next time for another exciting episode from the files of Project Binky.
Flip front goes up. Flip front goes down. Flip front goes up. Flip front goes down. Flip front goes up. Flip front goes down.